Okay, hey folks. I apologize I didn't do this earlier. I know the quiz is tomorrow, but I just wanted to quickly go through the slides from last class, just in case I know there were several of you that were still traveling or something and weren't back in class for Monday. I just wanted to give a quick commentary on the slides that I posted for chapter 15 that were what we covered last class, because it's pretty important material as well, even aside of the quiz. You know, some of you may want to be therapists someday or counselors, and that's what we're talking about. So I just wanted to give it a quick commentary. I'll try to go through this in like 15 minutes or something like that, which I took an hour to go through in class. So this will be short and sweet version. I'll try to skip stuff, even though that's really hard for me to do, because it's also important. So this is sort of what we talked about before break. This is about schizophrenia. You know, there's four different kind of the rule of quarters, four different groups of people with schizophrenia in terms of the prognosis. Some will never be psychotic again after their first psychotic experience, and some will be psychotic a few times. Some will be psychotic many times and will be impaired in between episodes of psychosis. So the next thing we talked about was suicide. And, oh, actually, I'm realizing where my video is. Yeah, there we go. Suicide is obviously a really tough thing to think about, and unfortunately it's one of the leading causes of death in people your age. That's because people your age usually don't die, but when they do die, it's usually because they get an accident or a rare disease or from suicide. So main thing is, if you or somebody is thinking about suicide, 988 is a really great resource. It's just a trained person who will be supportive to you. They're not going to try to lock you up or anything like that. That's just a good number to know about and to call. Usually people view suicide as a solution to a problem. You have a really big problem in your life, like you're really messed up, or your wife left you in something like that. And sometimes you feel like there's no hope for you. It's never going to get better. And so you think suicide is the only way out of the pain that you're in. And that's, we can understand that. Most people will think about suicide at least casually at some point in their life. That's over 50% of us will. So it's not like there's something wrong with you if you have thoughts like that. But I think when we're really serious about suicide, we are kind of in this dark cloud that's pretty different from reality. We feel like we really know that the future will never improve. And in reality, there's no way we can know whether the future is going to improve or not, 5 years down the road. Suicide is such a permanent decision, and we don't know what the future is going to hold in 5 years. There's really a lot of unknowns in life. So some of those unknowns can lead our life to improve in ways we couldn't have anticipated. So, yeah, if you know somebody who is suicidal, I think a really good rule of thumb is to just let them know that you care about them and that you're worried about them. Kind of speak from your heart. And that can be really helpful to kind of combat this belief that they may have that they're unlovable or they're going to be alone, essentially. To let them know that you care about them, that's a good message. Unfortunately, you can't force them to stay alive. If somebody wants to take their life, they can do that. They can lie to you and say they're not going to do it and then do it. But hearing a voice of caring is often a good thing for people who are suicidal. So now I'll move on to chapter 15 and quickly comment on that. So chapter 15 is about psychological disorders. No, it's not. It's about psychological treatment. And there's basically two different types of treatment. Lots of science has been done on treatment for psychological disorders, what works well and what doesn't. There's been a lot of randomized controlled trials on that, where you have a controlled condition and you randomly assign people to either the control condition where they, do yoga or something, and the real treatment condition of like a particular form of psychotherapy or a medication. And there's a lot of disorders that that particular forms of therapy or medications beat the control condition reliably by a lot in some cases. So I'm going to try to give you a sense of what works. talk therapy or psychotherapy is one big form of treatment. Geez, I don't know why this thing keeps moving on me. Sorry, hang on one sec. All right, that's pretty good. So yeah, there's lots of different forms of psychotherapy, and then you've got biological therapy, biological treatment. And your book says, biological therapy is a treatment of a disorder based on what's wrong with the body. I would say that's not really accurate, because a lot of times with medical treatments, we don't with biological treatments, we don't necessarily know why they work. We just know that they do work. So to me, a biological treatment is a treatment of using a physical approach, something material, such as putting a pill into your mouth and then seeing if that makes you get better, or running electricity through your head and seeing if that makes you get better. That's what ECT is. Or a lobotomy. It's destroying part of your brain, seeing if that makes you better. Lobotomy is really a last resort thing. It used to be very common. ECT is also sort of last resort, but less last resort than lobotomy. But if people are really not responding to any form of treatment, ECT is a good option. And if they don't respond to ECT or anything else for like years, sometimes in rare cases, people will have a lobotomy. Psychopharmacology is giving pills, and that's extremely common, obviously. But in none of these cases do we necessarily know why they work. So it's not that, we're getting to the root cause biologically. We may not. It's a pretty complicated thing, actually. We'll talk about medications next class tomorrow. All right. So I'm going to tell you about should have probably deleted this. I'll delete it now. I'm going to tell you about two forms of psychotherapy now, two forms of talk therapy. The first is the one that was invented by this fella, Sigmund Freud. This is Freud's office. Freud would have you lie down on the couch. He'd sit here in this chair behind you, out of your line of view, and he'd just say, tell me what comes to mind. And you would kind of free associate. You'd maybe start talking about the ceiling or something like that, because that's what you're looking at. Or you'd say something that happened to you that morning, and then you just connect it to whatever you want. You just kind of ramble on. And Freud thought that as you did this, you were revealing what was going on unconsciously. So this was the key to psychoanalysis, and Freud's huge contribution was that the unconscious mind is actually in charge of what's happening in your life way more than you realize. You're not aware of the stuff that's happening inside you. So he thought there were these two big forces under the surface, like an iceberg. You see an iceberg and it may be a large thing, but most of the iceberg's underwater. He thought our mind was like that most of our mind is unconscious. And there are these two big forces underneath the water, the superego and the id. The id is like the pleasure, aggression part of our mind that just wants to have sex with anything that moves and grab all the candy bars and get all the money, and punch anybody in the face who's in your way, or kill them. And the superego is sort of the voice of society, or the voice of your conscience, that's saying, no, don't kill people. Don't go try to have sex with that stranger. Don't take the candy bar. You're trying to lose weight. These forces are sort of always in battle with each other. And the ego is what makes up most of our conscious mind that we're actually aware of. And that's sort of there to manage the other two forces, the id and the superego. The other thing Freud contributed was the notion of defense mechanisms. Defenses are like, these defensive turrets in an old city that would protect you from the barbarians or whatever. The defenses in our mind protect us from our own unconscious. There may be things underneath our mind, under the surface, that are unconscious that we'd be very, very uncomfortable with. And defense mechanisms kind of protect us from those things, so we don't have to confront them directly. So a good example of that would be, say you have homosexual urges or attractions or desires. One defense mechanism Freud came up with was called reaction formation, which is to kind of align with the opposite of what really desire may be in you. So to be a very homophobic person and put down gay people a lot would be a reaction formation defense against homosexual desires that you may have. That's just one example. Freud said the most sophisticated defense mechanism is laughter. Just kind of laughing something off or joking about something is another defense. There were several, some of which his daughter Anna Freud contributed. About 10 or so defense mechanisms that he discussed. All right, so that's what his theory was about. And so psychoanalysis, where this form of therapy where he'd have you lie on the couch, it was all about bringing unconscious things to the surface so that you could kind of deal with them consciously. He thought people would be healed if he did that. And that's what his psychodynamic therapy was all about. He thought it worked really well. He wrote these case studies of his patients, and every time he'd be like, oh, look at this person. They came in with this problem. I did my psychoanalysis. It worked. They're healed. That's cool, and I think there's definitely a lot of truth to psychoanalysis and psychodynamic theory. He was clearly a genius, but he wasn't very scientific. Having someone come in to an expert and then they get better, it's not clear why they got better. Sometimes there's like placebo effects and stuff. You go to see this expert, and so you're a little more optimistic about your life, and then your life improves. So it's not clear whether psychoanalysis was why his patients were improving or how long they stayed improved after the therapy. What if 6 months after they saw Freud for psychoanalysis, maybe they were doing better right after, but what if they dove right into another depression 6 months or a year later? He didn't report that. And he wasn't a careful scientist doing like a randomized controlled trial of, 20 patients that he saw. He'd give psychoanalysis, and 20 patients he'd have them lie on a couch, but not free associate and have some kind of control condition. He didn't do that. And in his defense, nobody did that type of research back then. Research has been done like that on psychoanalysis since then, and it's not overwhelmingly positive. There are definitely some randomized controlled trials that show that psychoanalysis works for some things, but it's not a slam dunk that it works for everything. A good example is OCD. Psychodynamic therapy does not work for at all. What does work for OCD? Cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the next type of therapy I want to tell you about real quickly. CBT. The idea in CBT, the reason I have this triangle here is the triangle I drew on the board in class. Thoughts at the top, feelings, and behaviors are the three nodes of the triangle. And most people come to therapy because they want to change how they feel. In CBT, we realize you can't just change how you feel by clenching your fists and trying to be happy or trying not to be anxious. That doesn't work. In CBT, what we do, and I say we because this is the form of therapy I was trained in the most, is we change behavior and we change thought. And from those things, those are related to how you feel. There's these relationships, arrows you could draw in both directions across all three of these nodes. And if you change your behavior, that's going to change how you feel. If you change your thoughts, that's also going to change how you feel. That's what CBT is based on. So there's a couple examples of behavior therapy. One is behavioral activation, and this would be just planning out your day. This works really well for depression. If you're depressed and you don't have a lot of structure to your day, like you just have a lot of free time ahead of you, like you may have just had on spring break, or you may have in the summer, man, that's tough. That's really bad for your mental health usually, to have a ton of free time. So behavioral activation would be planning out your day so that it's a mix of things you enjoy doing, like watching Netflix or playing video games, but also stuff that gives you a sense of mastery, like you feel like you accomplished something. So doing the laundry or mowing the lawn, practicing an instrument so that you can play a new chord or something like that. And then also social things and taking care of yourself, especially exercise is a really good one to schedule in there. So if you have a mix of those four things, self-care, mastery, pleasure, and social stuff, you're probably going to feel a heck of a lot better than if you just kind of don't schedule and ride by the seat of your pants, and probably end up getting in a lot of loops of doing pleasurable stuff to just distract yourself from the fact that you don't feel very productive. So that's behavioral activation. Exposure therapy, we talked about in class a little bit with I think I talked about my mom and the spider phobia she had and what exposure therapy would look like there. That's extremely effective for lots of things, including specific phobias like my mother had with the spiders, or for OCD, or for PTSD. Yeah. And I think that actually may be about as far as we got. So I'll stop there. Hey, 15 minutes. I did it. I'll see you guys tomorrow.